She thought she was just fixing a boy's broken bicycle. But someone was watching. Someone powerful. And that moment, one quiet act of kindness, would change her life forever. A nurse, exhausted after a double shift. A billionaire, hiding behind tinted glass. A little boy, crying alone in the dirt, clutching a bike that was once his brother's. What brought them together was a twist of fate. What kept them together was something no money could ever buy. But when secrets unravel, families interfere, and jealousy rises from the past. Will love survive the pressure of two very different worlds colliding? It was nearly sunset when Fernanda Delgado left the hospital. 12 hours on her feet. Her scrub still smelled like antiseptic and sweat. Her back ached. Her feet throbbed. And yet, when the wind kissed her cheek on that quiet path through San Martin Park, she let out a breath she didn't even realize she was holding. That was her ritual. 10 minutes of stillness before returning to a tiny apartment and bills that never stopped arriving. She didn't expect to hear crying. It wasn't loud. Just a soft, stifled sob, coming from behind a tree near the path. And as she stepped closer, she saw him. A boy. Maybe 8. Tears streaking through the dust on his cheeks. One shoe untied. A red bicycle lying broken beside him, chain snapped, handlebar twisted, the front wheel bent like paper. "Hey, are you okay?" Fernanda knelt down, ignoring the dirt. "Did you fall?" The boy wiped his nose with the back of his hand. "My bike's dead," he said, voice trembling. "It was my brother's. He went to heaven. Now I don't know how to get home." Fernanda's heart cracked, quietly, inwardly. She'd seen that look before. A look kids shouldn't know, loss. "What's your name?" she asked gently. "Tommy Vargas." He looked up. "You're really pretty. Like the angel's grandma says, watch over my brother." She smiled, touched his shoulder. "I'm Fernanda. And guess what? I might be able to fix that angel bike of yours." What Tommy didn't know, what Fernanda didn't know, was that they were not alone. From the black Mercedes parked just yards away, a man watched everything. Alejandro Mendoza. CEO. Power broker. Billionaire. And right now? Absolutely still. Watching this woman kneel in the dirt for a boy she didn't know. Not for fame. Not for reward. Just because it was the right thing to do. He hadn't seen something that honest in years. But he had no idea that this woman, this nurse with kind hands and tired eyes, would be the only person who could break down the walls he spent a lifetime building. What would you do if a stranger changed your life? Could love really grow between two people from completely different worlds? Tell us in the comments, do you believe fate puts the right people in our path, even when we're not ready? The late afternoon sun draped San Martin Park in a gilded warmth, softening the edges of the world after a long, relentless day. Fernanda Delgado stepped onto the winding path, each footfall echoing exhaustion, a nurse fresh from a 12-hour shift, her scrubs clinging to her like a second skin, her heart still pounding to the rhythm of hospital alarms. In that moment of rare quiet, she allowed herself to breathe, to feel the gentle tug of a breeze as it swept away the echoes of pain she carried through crowded wards and frightened patients. A sudden, muffled sob tore through the calm. Fernanda froze, breath-catching, the echo of that single cry stirring memories she had buried, her own tears shed in a dusty backstreet years ago, the loneliness of a child who learned too soon that loss is the heaviest burden to bear. Without thinking, she followed the sound, heart hammering with a mix of dread and fierce compassion. Behind a gnarled oak, she found him. A little boy crouched on the grass, shoulders shaking, his small hands pressed to a face streaked with tears and dirt. Beside him lay a battered red bicycle, chain dangling uselessly, handlebars askew, the front wheel bent outward like a wounded wing. The image struck her chest like a physical blow. A relic of childhood broken by forces beyond a child's control. Kneeling in the dirt, Fernanda felt the pull of empathy so strong it blurred her vision. Dirt ground into her knees, but she barely noticed. All she saw was the boy's trembling form. "Hey there," she murmured. "Are you hurt?" The boy glanced up, eyes wide and brimming with anguish. They were dark pools of confusion and grief. When he spoke, his voice trembled like a leaf in a storm. "My bike, it was my big brother's before he left for heaven. Now how will I ever get home?" Fernanda's throat tightened. She recognized that word, heaven, too well. The bitter pang of loss she tried so hard to outrun now surged within her. She swallowed, steadying herself. "What's your name?" she asked gently, brushing a strand of hair from her eyes. "Tommy Vargas," he whispered, sniffling. "Grandma says angels watch over people. You look like one." A hollow ache opened in Fernanda's chest. She managed a smile, soft and reassuring. "I'm Fernanda. And I believe angels can come in scrubs and sneakers." She reached out, touching his shoulder. "Let's see if we can bring your bike back to life." As she examined the damage, twisted spokes, a snapped chain, Tommy watched her with a fragile hope. Every adjustment of her fingers, every small tool she offered, seemed to stitch a tiny thread of warmth into his broken world. But they were not alone. A black Mercedes idled on the park road, its engine off but its presence commanding attention. Inside, Alejandro Mendoza sat motionless, the fading light glinting off polished leather and tinted windows. His gaze was fixed, unblinking, as he watched Fernanda work. He'd come to the park seeking solitude from boardroom battles and cold, transactional charity events. He'd wanted silence, but instead found something he hadn't realized he was missing: authenticity. He leaned forward, studying her profile, the gentle curve of her brow, the way her fingers trembled with concern as she coaxed the chain back onto its gear. There was no audience, no cameras, no press release waiting in the back seat. Just a woman kneeling in the grass, offering help where it was desperately needed. Something inside him stirred, a vulnerability he had spent a lifetime burying under spreadsheets and stone-faced negotiations. He remembered the sting of betrayal, the loneliness that accompanied every calculated, philanthropic gesture he'd made for headlines. None of it had ever felt as real as this moment. Fernanda tightened a bolt with a small wrench, her uniform smudged with grease. She glanced up at Tommy, giving him a small, encouraging nod. In his eyes, she saw the spark of trust, so fragile, yet so vital. She took a deep breath and extended her hand. "Ready for a test ride?" Tommy's face cracked into a toothy grin. He climbed on, wobbling at first, then pedaled forward. The bicycle held together just long enough for him to circle back, laughter bubbling from him like sunlight breaking through clouds. Fernanda's lips curved in a smile, but her mind was already racing forward, bracing for the next shift at the hospital, for the bills waiting on her kitchen counter, for the ache of her own past. And in the back of her mind, a quiet voice whispered, "Why do I feel like I've done more good here than in all my years wearing scrubs?" Across the asphalt, Alejandro closed his eyes momentarily, as if waking from a dream. He started the engine, the Mercedes humming back to life. There would be time later to introduce himself, to offer the kind of help his wealth could buy. But not yet. For now, he would remain the unseen witness, absorbing the grit and grace of a simple kindness that neither money nor power could replicate. As Fernanda watched Tommy pedal away, heart lifted by his joy, she didn't know she was being watched by the richest man in the city. And he didn't know how deeply that quiet act would pull at the strings of his carefully ordered life. Morning light filtered through the cracked window of Bruno's coffee corner, painting the worn wooden tables in warm hues of gold. Fernanda Delgado pushed open the door, the familiar chime echoing with an almost comforting welcome. She rubbed her temples. Another 12-hour shift ahead, but the promise of a strong espresso and a few minutes of calm felt like a lifeline. She settled in a corner booth, the same one she'd claimed countless times before. As she waited for her order, she caught sight of him, a man in a tailored navy blazer, crisp white shirt, jeans, and a vulnerability in his posture that cut through her fatigue. He stood by the counter, pausing over the pastry case as though choosing between sugar and silence. When he approached her table, her heart stuttered. She hadn't expected to see him again so soon. "Mind if I join you?" he asked, voice steady but gentle. "Please." He slid into the seat opposite her, and for a moment neither spoke. The barista placed 2 steaming mugs of dark roast between them, the rich aroma filling the space. "Thank you, for earlier, in the park," he said, avoiding her gaze. "I didn't do much," she replied, stirring sugar absent-mindedly. "Just helped where it was needed." His hand trembled as he lifted his cup. "I've seen a lot of help," he admitted quietly, "but it's usually with cameras, press releases, tax breaks." He let the words die on his lips, eyes clouded by something she recognized all too well, remorse. "What you did for that boy, without expecting anything, felt real." Fernanda's pulse quickened. She thought she'd buried old wounds, pain from losing her father, betrayal by those who took advantage of her kindness. But here was someone who saw her act not as charity, but as proof of something purer. "You don't have to explain," she said softly. "I understand hiding behind gestures." He nodded, grief flickering across his face. "It's exhausting, pretending. My world, it demands perfection. Calculations. Roy." He forced a rueful smile. "I forgot what it felt like to just be human." Silence settled between them, heavy with unspoken truths. She studied him, the tension in his jaw, the memory in his eyes. He belonged to a realm she could never infiltrate, yet in this unassuming coffee shop, he was merely a man seeking solace. "You seem tired," she observed, voice gentle. "Tired of being me," he whispered. "I've spent my life building an empire. I thought that would fill the emptiness. But all it did was echo." Fernanda closed her eyes, empathy blooming in her chest. She remembered the nights she juggled 3 jobs to pay tuition, the bone-deep ache of watching her mother struggle to keep the lights on. She had no empire, but her world was stitched together by moments of genuine connection, moments like this. "Tell me why you really asked me here," she urged, leaning forward. He paused, studying her face as though searching for a secret map. "Because I want to learn how to care again. And I thought, if I watch you, the way you laugh with strangers, the way you let yourself feel, maybe I can remember how." Her throat tightened. His raw honesty laid bare everything she feared, that kindness could be weaponized, that compassion might be a weak strategy in a ruthless world. Yet here he was, willing to sit with discomfort to find something lost. "You're brave," she murmured. He traced the rim of his mug. "No. I'm terrified." "Good. Then you're human." He smiled, a real smile that crinkled the corners of his eyes. For the first time, Fernanda felt her walls waver. "Can I share something?" she asked gently. "Please. When I was 12, my father taught me to fix bikes in his workshop. He said, 'Mija, it's not the wrench that fixes the chain, it's knowing that someone believes you can do it.' He never saw how far I'd go. He never saw all the people I'd help in his name." Alejandro closed his eyes, absorbing her words. "He sounds like an angel," he said, voice thick with emotion. "I wish I'd had someone like that." Her chest ached at his confession. She reached across the table, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. "Maybe you still can." They sat in companionable silence as the shop bustled around them, baristas calling orders, steam hissing from the espresso machine. 2 strangers from different worlds shared a moment of raw vulnerability, their lives forever altered by a single cup of coffee and the courage to ask questions that cut deeper than any boardroom debate. The sterile hum of fluorescent lights greeted Fernanda as she stepped into the emergency wing of St. Mary's Hospital. She paused at the nurse's station, fatigue clinging to her bones like a heavy coat. But exhaustion vanished the moment she saw him. Alejandro Mendoza, pale and slumped on a hospital gurney, a dark bruise blooming at his temple. A tube fed oxygen into his nostrils, monitors beeped in stuttered rhythms, echoing the jagged pulse in her own chest. Her mind convulsed with guilt and fear. Hours ago, he'd invited her to dinner, and she'd refused. She'd recoiled at the thought of his world crashing into hers. And now he lay before her, broken, vulnerable, stripped of every title he had ever worn. Nurse Delgado, called Dr. Garcia, his voice clipped with urgency. He's lucky you got here when you did. She nodded, sliding on gloves, her hands trembling despite years of practice. As she checked his vitals, she recalled his confession in the coffee shop, "I forgot how to be human." Now, he was frighteningly, painfully, human. A voice at the doorway startled her, a woman in a Chanel suit, heels clicking with precise authority. Fernanda's heart sank. His mother. She had arrived. "Where is he?" the woman demanded, eyes sweeping the ward until they locked onto Fernanda's uniform. "I'm the nurse assigned to Mr. Mendoza," Fernanda replied, her voice steady though her pulse thundered. "He's stable, but we need rest and observation for his concussion." The woman's lips thinned. Her gaze was a scalpel, cutting, cold. "I think you've done enough." Fernanda's stomach dropped. "Pardon? I don't see why my son needs charity care from a hospital nurse." "He requested me," Fernanda said, voice trembling between defiance and fear. "He asked specifically for my care." At that, Dr. Garcia stepped forward. "Mrs. Mendoza, your son's condition is serious." "We need continuity, thank you, doctor," the woman interrupted. She turned her glare back to Fernanda. "Your services are no longer required." Time lapsed like a cruel joke. Every second, her blood pulsed with memories of being overlooked. Of scrubbing floors and charting vital signs as colleagues took credit. She imagined his mother handing her an envelope, money to go away. Knowing exactly how much it would take to erase her. But then, his eyes fluttered open, pale blue flecks more vulnerable than any boardroom glare. He looked at Fernanda, confusion giving way to relief. "Fernanda," he whispered. His mother stiffened. "Alejandro," he reached out, fingers brushing Fernanda's wrist. "Please," he said, voice raw. "Let her stay." His mother's posture wavered for a heartbeat. Then, with a curt nod, she turned and left, her heels clicking away, leaving tension hanging like thick curtains behind her. Fernanda exhaled, tears pricking her eyes. He had chosen her, his nurse, his friend, the only person who had never seen him as a business asset. In that fragile moment, she felt the weight of their worlds collide, her scrubs and his suit, her fear and his desperation, her kindness and his guarded heart. She pressed a cool hand to his forehead. "You're safe," she murmured. "I'm here." As she adjusted his foreline, he watched her with gratitude etched in every line of his face. She realized then that every moment of doubt, every time she had braced against his world, had prepared her for this, to be the anchor he needed. "Thank you," he whispered. She offered a small smile. "You don't owe me anything." He paused, eyes clouded with emotion. "I owe you, so much more than that." Her heart fluttered as she glimpsed the man behind the empire, someone capable of real vulnerability, someone willing to defy his own mother for a simple act of care. In that moment, she understood how love could force even the most controlled among us to surrender to truth. The scent of antiseptic still clung to the air when Alejandro reached into his suit jacket pocket and drew out a small, velvet box. Fernanda sat beside him in the softly lit hospital room, exhaustion etched into the curve of her shoulders. He'd insisted she remain by his side until morning, but no words could have prepared her for what came next. "Fernanda," he began, voice hushed yet resolute, "these last weeks, you've given me more than I ever thought possible. You reminded me how to feel. How to hope." Her heart thundered, equal parts anticipation and fear. She remembered every calculated charity he'd orchestrated, always with a press team on standby. But here, now, it felt pure. He snapped open the box. Inside, nestled on ivory velvet, lay a ring, a sparkling diamond ring encircled by tiny sapphires that caught the light like tears of joy. "Will you marry me?" Time stilled. Fernanda's breath trembled. Memories cascaded, her father's makeshift workshop, the nights she studied by a single lamp, the loneliness she had vowed never to revisit. And here was a man, an empire builder, offering her a life she had once thought impossible. Before she could answer, the room's door swung open. A whisper of designer fabric preceded a familiar figure, Isabella Montenegro, his former fiancée and society's golden trophy. Isabella's gaze, cool as polished marble, fixed on the ring. "Engaged?" she asked softly, lips curling into a smile laced with steel. "How unexpected." Fernanda's pulse spiked. She rose slowly, every breath a battle between indignation and decorum. "Yes," Alejandro replied, stepping forward. "I'm asking Fernanda to be my wife." Isabella's laugh was soft but sharp. "I heard you were lonely," she said. "But I never imagined this." She offered Fernanda a condescending nod. "Good luck navigating that world." With that, she swept out, leaving a hush in her wake. The storm she brought was silent, but its shockwaves rippled through Fernanda's core. Doubt flooded her mind. Does she think I'm unworthy? Is my love for him enough to withstand this? Alejandro closed the door gently and turned to Fernanda, vulnerability laid bare in his eyes. "I know this is sudden." Tears pricked hers. "It's more than that," she whispered. "It's real. But is it strong enough?" He reached for her hand, the diamond's fire dancing between them. "I don't just want you by my side. I need you. And I want the world to see it." A swell of fear and longing rose within her. Fear of his world's scrutiny, longing for a life built on truth. She pressed her palm into his. "Yes," she breathed. His relief was a soft exhale. Yet as she slid the ring onto her finger, the hum of fluorescent lights felt fragile against the roaring uncertainty beyond these walls. Word spread like wildfire. By noon, headlines had transformed from "billionaire's accident" to "billionaire's betrothal," love or spectacle? Social feeds buzzed with speculations. Some praised the romance. Others whispered of opportunism. Fernanda scrolled through comments with a sinking heart, "She's in it for the money. Gold digger alert. He'll grow bored soon." That evening, Alejandro escorted her home through silent streets. City lights flickered like distant stars, beautiful but unmoving. "Ignore them," he urged softly. "Their voices don't matter." But inside, Fernanda grappled with a deeper storm. The ache of betrayal she once felt when trust had been broken, and the fragile bloom of acceptance in her heart. She realized true love demanded the courage to face not only outside judgment but the turmoil within. They paused at her apartment door. He cupped her face, thumb brushing her cheek. "Tomorrow," he said, "we'll plan our wedding ceremony, in the very park where we met." She met his gaze, resolve flickering into a steady flame. "Yes. But first," she inhaled, grounding herself. "I need to stand by you, not behind the headlines." He nodded, gratitude shining in his eyes. Together. The morning air in San Martin Park was crisp with promise when Fernanda stepped onto the flower-strewed aisle. Sunlight filtered through the oak leaves, turning the dew-kissed grass into a sea of gold. Somewhere beyond the rows of chairs filled with friends, family, and colleagues, she heard children's laughter. Tommy and his little cousins chasing bubbles that floated like time itself, fragile and beautiful. Her gown, a simple sheath of ivory, brushed the ground as she walked toward the man waiting beneath an arch woven from wildflowers. Alejandro stood tall in navy linen, his eyes alight with awe and joy. He wore no crown, no badge of power, just a smile that reached deep into her soul, a silent vow that their worlds would remain intertwined. As she took his hand, the hush fell between them. Memories flashed, the moment she'd knelt in the dirt to fix Tommy's bike, the coffee shop confessions, the hospital room where truth and loyalty had come to life, the hush before her whispered yes. Every step had led here, the crossroads of pain and promise, betrayal and forgiveness, fear and fierce love. Their officiant, a childhood friend of Fernanda's, spoke softly about two journeys converging, two hearts forging a shared path. With each vow they exchanged, Fernanda felt the weight of doubt lift, replaced by something steadier, a fierce hope that love could rebuild what fear had torn apart. "I promise to see you," Alejandro said, "not as the world sees me, but as I see you, kind, courageous, my compass." "And I promise," Fernanda replied, her voice trembling with emotion, "to stand by you when storms arrive, to share in both shadows and sunlight, because your heart is my home." When they slid rings onto each other's fingers, his a simple band of white gold, hers set with a single sapphire echoing his first gift, the air buzzed with a collective exhale of wonder. Tommy scampered forward, his face alight, and presented them with a small wooden plaque he'd painted, "Together, we are home." Applause rippled through the guests. Alejandro lifted Fernanda into his arms, spinning her in a circle that felt like flight. She laughed, a clear, triumphant sound that danced above the canopy of trees. But as celebration swept them up, Fernanda felt the pulse of her old self, the survivor who had scraped by on hope, who had mended broken things with trembling hands, meld with this new self, a partner in a grander vision. Only hours ago, she'd feared stepping into his world, terrified that her scars would mark her as unworthy. Now, she saw that every scar was a testament to resilience, every tear a seed of compassion. The park's bustle faded as they sealed their vows with a kiss. In that instant, they weren't merely bride and groom, they were architects of a future they would build together. Later, under a canopy of twinkling lanterns, Alejandro took the microphone. Fernanda felt nervous, but his warm grip steadied her. He began, "When we first met, I owned the greatest fortune on paper, yet felt bankrupt inside. Fernanda taught me that true wealth is the lives you touch, the kindness you give, and the love you nurture." He gestured to Fernanda, tears glistening in his eyes. "Tonight, we launched the Delgado Mendoza Foundation, $100 million to fund community clinics, scholarships, and safe havens for families in need. Because what began with a broken bicycle and a nurse's gentle hands will now become a promise to the world, that when compassion meets opportunity, miracles follow." Fernanda's heart swelled with pride and humility. She pictured the families they would serve, children with dreams, parents with hopes, communities lifted by care and opportunity, just as she had been lifted. As the first dance began, they moved together in sync, two souls entwined against the backdrop of a world waiting to be changed. The shadows of doubt and betrayal had given way to a dawn of purpose and unity. And somewhere in the distance, Tommy's laughter rang clear. A reminder that every great journey begins with a single act of kindness. Together, Fernanda and Alejandro stepped boldly into their new beginning, ready to face every storm and savor every sunrise, because they had learned the greatest truth of all: love is the foundation upon which we build our most extraordinary futures.